Hi everyone, I'm Schmoggy, and in today's video we take a look at Hype the Time Quest. See how to get the game running on Steam Deck and Linux. Let's get started. Okay, first things first. On the screen right now you see a list with everything we need and we will go through it step by step. But of course you can also jump right into it by using the provided timestamps. Step 1. Get the game. Okay, this might seem obvious, but hear me out. You see, the game is rather old.
R2!
And when it comes to these games, sometimes they can be pretty hard to find. Thankfully, nowadays many of them do get a re-release, but sadly this game never got that treatment, which I think is a real shame.
Shame! Shame! Shame!
There is actually a community wishlist page on GOG, you are seeing it right now. So if you want to be able to eventually buy the game there, make sure to support it. But yeah, beside that, the game is not being sold anymore, and that leaves us with two options. The first one would be to head over to eBay and grab a used copy. Even though it can be a bit pricey, I would still recommend to get one because by using the disc, the installation process is more streamlined. The second option would be to go on a treasure hunt and find yourself an ISO file.
Adventure!
To be honest, the best way is to just get both things, because you actually need to have the disc inserted or alternatively an ISO mounted in order to play, thanks to the copy protection, which is a real pain in the ass. There are several places where you can get an ISO from, but I'm not gonna show you, it's up to you. Let me just say, if a game is not sold anymore, especially an old one, I consider it as abandonware, and when it comes to abandonware, you probably know where to look. For instance, there is a specific and well-known internet archive for things like that. There you have it.
Worry not, we'll follow our instincts! This way!
Step 2. Wine and Proton. Okay, we're gonna use Wine or Proton, depending on which one you prefer. Obviously, on the Steam Deck, it makes sense to rely on Proton, but Wine does also work just fine. The important part, however, is to make sure using a specific version for each one of them. You see, a common problem you will encounter with older games is getting in-game videos to play. The reason for that is the lack of old video codecs that were shipped and used back then. In the case of Proton, Valve's version doesn't come with all the needed codecs. Therefore, you have to use GE Proton, a customized Proton build by the community. It comes with additional codecs or at least workarounds for them. In the case of Wine, at least in my tests, I couldn't get the videos to play by using the version from my package manager, which is the current one from the staging branch. I even did some tinkering with winetricks and presumably installed the right codecs, which should be Quartz and the Intel or Indio Video Codex 5, depending on how you want to call it. But in the end, it didn't work out. On the other hand, to my surprise, by using Wine's flatpak version, it runs out of the box without any tinkering at all. I'm not quite sure why that is. I would assume both versions are more or less the same, but yeah, if you know more about it, please write it down in the comments below. Essentially, the game has two videos, the intro and outro. There's also a third one, the Ubisoft logo thing, if you want to count that in, but otherwise that's it. So if it's important to you to see the videos in-game, make sure to use the versions I mentioned. Otherwise, you can just use the standard Proton or the Wine version of your choice. The videos can also be watched outside of the game, you can find them in the game directory. Step 3. Graphics Wrapper. Okay, we're gonna need a wrapper. The game relies on old graphic APIs like DirectDraw and nGlide. And in order to make your system understand it, we need to translate them into something more modern, like DirectX 11 and 12 or Vulkan. We're gonna stick to nGlide because it runs better, and for that we need a wrapper called nGlide. I drop a link to its website in the description below, so make sure to get the latest version, which is 2.10. The nice thing about nGlide is that it directly translates to Vulkan. So we are skipping one translation step which we would normally do, for instance, using a different wrapper like DG Voodoo. And while you are on the nGlide's website already, make sure to also download their patch for the game, as we are gonna need that too. It does a few important things, such as making the game to start in the first place, removing some parts of the old copy protection, and finally, making the game portable. Okay, the last one would be to talk about problems you may still encounter, but we're gonna do that at the end of the video. So for now, let's jump into it. Alright, we are now in desktop mode on my Steam Deck. I've got my USB disk drive already plugged in, so it should show up pretty soon. There we go. We will mount and open it. And after a few seconds, it should show up. Okay, there it is. We will close this for now, and before we begin, keep in mind that I will mainly focus on Wine when installing and playing the game. But every step does also apply to Proton, except of course the installation of Wine. Just make sure when it comes to installing the nGlide's wrapper to use the same Proton prefix where you installed the game. Okay, now let's install the Wine's flatpak version. But before you already head out to the Discover store, for some reason the newest Wine version is not visible on the front end, so we actually need to use the terminal to install it. But don't worry, it's very simple. We will open the terminal and we will type the following in: flatpak install flathub org.wine tab, type a slash and tap again. And with the slash we have actually the option to choose between different branches. If you tap again, you see there are 3 branches in total. And we need the 23.08. This is the newest one. So we type 23, tap again and hit enter. Now it will ask you if you want to do a system or user installation. Normally when you install something through the Discover store on the Steam Deck, it will pick the user one. So we will do that too. Type 2 and enter. Now it will show you all the dependencies that come with the Wine's flatpak version. This is also fine, so type Y for yes and enter. Now it will install the Wine's flatpak version. Okay, installation complete. The next step would be to create a Wine prefix. But before we do that, we open our system settings, type flat and open the flatpak permission settings, click on Wine and make sure that these 2 options here are properly configured. All user files with the read-write option is actually needed so Wine can create something in our home directory. The old system files with the read-only permission is needed, well, at least in my case, because the original disk is mounted in the root directory. This is looking fine, so I will close this for now. And we will create our Wine prefix. We can do this in the terminal again. For that, we type the following in: flatpak run --env, which stands for environment, equal and quotation mark. And now we will actually specify the Wine prefix with its destination. Wine prefix equal slash home deck slash games. This is a folder I have already created. Slash, and we will specify the Wine prefix with the name type. Quotation mark again. org.wine, and we will use wine cfg. As you can see, it will now create a Wine prefix in the specified destination. This is looking good. We can close this for now. And I will open our home directory and show you real quick. Here's our folder games. And here's our WINEPREFIX. Now with our WINEPREFIX created, we can install the game. Just a quick reminder, if you use Proton instead, you would now open your Steam library and add a new non-Steam game entry. You would point it to the setups executable, force a specific Proton version, and run the installation process through it. It will then create a new Proton prefix in your compat data directory. Okay, let's get back to Wine and install the game. We will do this in the terminal again. I press my arrow key up, so I don't have to write everything again. And I will point it to the setup.exe of the original disk. There you go. Hit enter. And if you're wondering, I'm from Germany, so I use the German version. We click on install. We click on, in English, it should be called customize. This option is fine. This is actually the full installation option. But the important thing we have to do is click on this button here and uncheck this option here, Microsoft DirectX Media. If you don't do this, the installation process will reach 100%, but at the end it will just abort. Click OK. Click install. Now it asks for the destination path in our Windows environment. This is also fine. You can click OK. And the installation process starts. This will take up a few minutes, so I will just skip forward. Okay, the installation has just finished. We press OK. No, I don't want to read the README now. And now we will close this window. I'm going to delete the new desktop icons because I don't need them. With the installation completed, we will now head to the nGlide's website to download the graphics wrapper. We will open our browser, type in nGlide. No, definitely no. zeussoftware.com, nGlide glide wrapper, this is the correct one. Click on downloads, nGlide. And as you can see, this is the version 2.10. This is the correct one. Click on download. And while we are here, scroll down to the end and click on nGlide compatibility list. Here you can find the mentioned hype patch we need. Search for hype and click here on this link. So it will download the patch. Okay, we are now finished. Close the browser. We will now install the nGlide graphics wrapper. We will do this in a terminal again. The same way like before. I press my arrow up key again. And I will point it to the nGlide setup. Home, deck. It should be on the downloads. Actually, let me just check it real quick. Downloads, there it is. I will copy the name, paste it in, and hit enter. Click on install, click close. There you go. Now, with the nGlide's graphics wrapper installed, we will install the nGlide patch. We will head back to our downloads folder. Here's our hype patch. We will open the zip file, and at the same time we will head to our WINEPREFIX, which is under Home, Games, Hype, Ubisoft, Hype the Time Quest, and we will copy these files, except the README because we don't need it, into the games directory. Click on Overwrite. There you go. Now we have to do several things at once, and just for convenience, I will open the Wine Explorer. Another quick reminder, you can also use the Wine Explorer for your Proton prefix by using the flatpak Proton tricks. First, we want to head over to the game directory and open the ubassistant.exe. This is the game's own configuration menu for the graphics. Make sure to choose the 3dFX option. This is our Glide API. And under Advanced Graphics option, make sure that everything is set like you're seeing right now. Click OK. Click Apply. After that, we will install the patch we just copied before. We can do this with the patch install.batch. Just double click it, and a small terminal window, as you just saw, will open up real quick. And that's all. The next thing will be to configure the nGlide graphics wrapper. We can do this in the Windows directory, syswow64, and here just search for nGlide. nGlide config.exe. Double click it. Now the important thing here is to choose Vulkan for the video backend. And we can also deactivate the splash screen so it won't show up every time we launch the game. Another two important options are the screen resolution and the aspect ratio. Now it all depends on how you want to play the game. If you don't care at all, you can just leave it as it is. But in my case, I like to play the game with its original aspect ratio, which is 4:3. And at the same time, I like to higher up the resolution than its original one, which is 640 by 4080. To do this, I change the resolution here to 1024 by 768. And I like this resolution specifically because it is just below the Steam Deck's native resolution. And while maintaining the original aspect ratio, the black bars around the game screen are as small as possible. Under aspect ratio, we choose the aspect direction option. So with this, the original aspect ratio is maintained. You can always come back here later and change things around, but for now we are finished. Click Apply and click Exit. Now we need to do another thing, but we will close the Wine Explorer first. I will close the zip file, and we will head back to our game directory, which is here, and we will create a new folder and call it Ubisoft. This is needed because after installing the patch, the game executable is looking after a configuration file in its own game directory, instead of the old destination, which is under the Windows directory. Therefore, we will go back to the Windows directory, jump into Ubisoft. This is the configuration file. We will copy it, go back again, and paste it into our new directory. After we have done that, we are actually finished with this setup, and in our case, the last thing we have now to do is adding the game to Steam. we will open our Steam library, add a game, add a non-Steam game, hit browse, and we will point it to the executable in our WINEPREFIX, which is under Home, Games, Hype. And this is important. We have to choose the correct executable one because the game comes with two executables depending on which graphics API you are using. In our case, we are using the nGlide one, so we have to choose the DFXVR one. And of course, if you are using Proton, you would change your non-Steam game entry in such a way that it no longer points to the setup's executable, but instead to the one you are seeing right now. Click this and open. Add selected programs. Now we will have to find it first because it has a really bad name. We will rename it really quick and call it Hype so we can find it later. Normally you would now head over to compatibility and tell Steam to use a specific Proton version for the game. But in our case, because we are using the Wine's flatpak version, we have to do something different. We have to actually tell Steam to use the Wine flatpak's version to launch the game. And we do this by copy this command here and paste it right before the destination path. And also make sure that the path here is between quotation marks because of the spacing. Now we are finished and we can do a quick test to see if the game actually works. For that, I'm gonna use GameScope in the launch options. Now, you don't have to use this as the Steam Deck in-game mode automatically uses GameScope, but in my case, as I'm using an external screen right now, I have to use GameScope, otherwise when a game attempts to play its in-game videos, my screen just goes black. I assume this has something to do with reducing the resolution while playing the videos to something my screen doesn't support, so just keep that in mind. Okay, let's close this window, click on Hype, click play. As you can see, the game is starting just fine and the videos are also playing. Let's hit new game. Intro is also playing fine. And the game seems to be working. Okay, I will close this for now. Let's open the properties again and delete the launch options. We will now jump into game mode and I will show you the last important things. We are now in gaming mode and I'm gonna start the game right now. And as you can see, the game is starting just fine, with the in-game videos also playing. I will now open the quick access menu and show you my recommended settings. So if you remember, in the nGlide configurations menu, I did set up a specific resolution. So when I turn scaling mode to integer, you can see that the game screen is getting a little bit smaller, but just a tiny bit, which is fine for me. And the game screen is really crisp right now, as it runs with the specified resolution. You can turn this back to auto if you like. So the game screen is completely filled up, at least at the horizontal, but it does also get a little bit blurry. So if you don't care, you can just leave it like that, but I like to play with the integer scaling mode. Okay, I will now hit new game to show you another thing. Let's skip the intro for now. I will open the performance overlay. And if you look at the frame time, it's really off. The reason for that is the game internally renders with 48 frames per second, as you can see on the GameScope line. And to fix that, you have to set the frame limiter from GameScope down to something like 45. And as you can see now, the frame time is really good. And with the frame time set to 45, the screen from my Steam Deck OLED stays at 90 Hz. Okay, I think that's everything you need to know for game mode. We are back in desktop mode, and now we will talk about some problems that people have with this game. I personally didn't encounter them, so if you followed my instructions and play on Steam Deck or Linux, you should be fine. But just to be sure, let's talk about it. So, one problem that people encounter is not being able to save in-game. And there are actually 3 reasons or solutions for this. One reason is, or could be, if we jump back to our WINEPREFIX and head to the game directory, into the game data folder and the save game folder. As you can see now, there are already 2 folders present. These are my 2 save files I have tested earlier. And these folders get automatically created when saving in-game. So if you encounter an error or just not being able to save in the game, you could create these folders manually. And the names of the folders starts with save game 0 and end with save game 9. Another reason for the problem could be a wrong path in the configuration file of the game. So let's head back to our games directory and now jump into the Ubisoft directory we created earlier. Here we're going to open the ubi.ini file. If you remember, in the setup we had the option to change the path of the game. If you left the default one, then this path here should be the correct one. But if you have changed it, make sure the new path can be found in the directory line. The third reason or solution would be to open your browser and look up for some save files. It's pretty easy to find them. Just make sure the language of the game version these save files are taken from is the same like yours. If not, then, well, it probably won't work, but you can give it a try. If you've got your save files, then just drop them into the save game folder in your games directory. Right here. Okay, another problem people encounter is the games crashing while attempting to play the in-game videos. As you saw earlier in our tests, the videos were playing just fine. But if you encounter this problem for whatever reason, you can tell the game to just skip the videos. You do this by changing the configuration file in the games directory. Head over to the Ubisoft folder and open the ubi.ini file. Change the line called play video from 1 to 0 and save the file. With this, the game will just skip the videos and the game should no longer crash. Now let's talk about the, in my opinion, biggest problem when it comes to the game, and that's the copy protection. If you watched the beginning of the video, you remember me saying to just get both things, the original disc and an ISO file. You might ask yourself now,
But Smoggy, why should I get a disc if I need an ISO file anyway? Can't I just install the game by using an ISO?
Well, good question. I'm gonna show you now what happens if you try to install the game just by using an ISO file. For this, first I'm gonna create a new WINEPREFIX. Let's just call it Hype 2. Click OK. Then I'm gonna mount an ISO file of the game I found on a treasure hunt. And after this, I'm gonna run the setup on the ISO file. This looks good, right? Let's click on install.
Yeah, great. It asks for the disk. Okay.
Let's close this. Now, don't get me wrong. There are of course other ways to install the game if you just got an ISO. For instance, you can head over to PC Gaming Wiki. They have an instruction for manually installing the game. It includes copy and paste a bunch of stuff. Or you could also use the alternative installer from GitHub. In either case, it may or may not work. I personally tried the PC Gaming Wiki method, and while I didn't encounter any problems, I of course can't give you any guarantees for later in the game. Additionally, if you go with both methods, make sure to install the MFC42 component through winetricks, because if you don't do this, then the installation of the nGlide's patch will just fail, and like mentioned earlier in the video, without the patch the game doesn't run at all. In my opinion, all these problems people encounter, like for instance not being able to save the game, do actually come from these different installation methods. Of course, I could be wrong, but that's the reason why I prefer to install the game by using the disk. And I only have to do this once, because afterwards I can just back up my WINEPREFIX and I have the game ready to go. Okay, after everything's said, just remember, you have to mount the ISO to play the game. If you don't, the game will ask for the disk when attempting to start a new game in the main menu. Of course, you can also use the original disk. In fact, I was using it all the time in the video. But I assume you don't want to have it and a USB disk drive all the time with you. At least I don't. So let's stick with the ISO. And luckily, we only have to do this once. So mount the ISO file, start the game, start a new game, close the game again, and unmount the ISO. The game will still think the ISO is present. I guess this has something to do how Wine or Proton manage their drives in their prefixes. You can even observe this when you open WineCFG and head over to the drive step. The virtual drive used to mount the ISO remains there until you actually remove it manually. But I'm not gonna show you, as it's not that important. Okay, I think we can wrap things up. I know this was a lot to take in, but I still hope I could help you to experience your childhood memories again. Hype is such a great game to me, and being able to enjoy it again on the Steam Deck is a really great and fresh experience. So if you have any questions left or even encounter problems we didn't talk about in the video, write it down in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Bye!